As we talked about in phases or stages of therapy, the first stage is known as safety and stabilization. This can also be called the awareness and regulation phase. In order to feel secure and safe, we first have to be more aware of how our entire system engages in every situation we're in. In general, most of us were never taught to be more aware of ourselves. We have to learn how and what to pay attention to if we want to learn awareness. During our awareness stage, our approach to healing trauma and anxiety starts with a sense of curiosity and discovery. This usually does not come naturally. Learning how to become your own personal detective is the first place to start. Ideally, the things we become aware of and learn to regulate are some of the core elements that we will bring before Jesus within our Philippians framework. Over the years, I've developed a visual model for these elements. This increased awareness of the elements gives us a better chance to be able to regulate each of these areas. And when we talk about regulating, what we're really talking about is keeping things calm and manageable. There's a sense of gentle ups and downs that don't cause us to get overwhelmed or distressed and upset. Hopefully, this will help us stay away from impulsive or self-destructive behaviors. I call the model for our full system the private eye. This highlights the need for us to look more into ourselves like detectives. This video will be a general overview of the private eye. The future videos will discuss and look at each one of these elements a little bit more closely. So here it is. I recommend that you go to the website and download and print some of the copies so that you can help be reminded to pay attention to these things in your day-to-day situations. We'll start in the middle and work our way out from there. In the middle is the beat. Each element is its own focus. However, it's really important to remember that each element is always interacting with the other element, almost like a dance where they're playing off of each other. They're constantly impacting and being impacted by the other one. What this means is that if we can find ways to identify and change each element, this potentially leads to changes in the other elements all by itself. The B stands for our body and our brain. As we'll see, these two physical aspects are incredibly important when it comes to healing trauma. Oddly enough, most models of therapy generally overlook them. Our body can be most easily noticed through paying attention to things like body function, muscle tension, relaxation, and our visceral organs. These three core areas will be the focus for learning ways to regulate our body. The brain and all the connections inside that make up our neurology are harder to pay attention to in our daily lives. The brain and how it interacts with our body is really key to understanding how to heal from trauma. The main area we'll pay attention to in the brain is how to include both sides of it when we're processing trauma. The E in our beat is our emotions or our feelings. Learning to name and rate the intensity of our feelings reduces some of the impulsive reactions that we have to situations. As renowned interpersonal neurobiology psychiatrist Dan Siegel says regarding emotion regulation, you have to be able to name it to tame it. Understanding and naming our emotions helps us learn from them without having to be overwhelmed by them. The A in our beat is our actions. These are the things we do and say. Just as important, if not more so, are our urges or the things we want to do in situations. Some trauma experts believe that our urges during and following our traumas are the actions we wanted to complete in those moments and weren't able to. These urges are called action tendencies. Identifying, noticing, and releasing these action tendencies are important steps towards healing our traumas. The T of our beat is our thoughts. Experts in cognitive behavioral therapy believe most of our thoughts are out of our awareness. Yet, the thoughts we don't notice can still have a huge impact on other elements of our beat. Slowing down to notice our thoughts gives us tons of information we would otherwise be missing. Another important element of our thoughts are our core beliefs. And these are the ones that we have about ourselves, others, the world at large, and God. Looking at each individual piece of the beat helps us to learn ways to keep each of these areas more regulated. Again, every area of the beat is closely connected and dependent on the other ones. Most of the time, it's really hard to be able to tell which element is driving or being driven by the other one, and to what degree that might be happening. Since they are so connected, making adjustments to just one of these areas will almost always change another area. It's one complete system that works together. As we become more aware of these 4 essential areas, we begin to see a little bit better how we react to situations. This understanding gives us ideas and strategies maybe to change each one of these elements and ultimately affect our whole system in healthier ways. Our entire beat is influenced by our relationships. In fact, nothing happens to the beat without our connections to others and our various roles and interactions with them. I have a strong belief that one of the most damaging aspects of trauma is the idea that in those moments, we're completely disconnected from others in ways that leave us feeling alone and isolated long after the event or the events have happened. In learning about relationships in our private eye, it's important to have a basic understanding of how we attach to others. These attachment styles really begin forming the moment we're born. When we look at attachment ideas, we find that one of our key attachments is how we attach to God. What we think of Him, how we think He sees us, and how we think about His role in our lives are all super important. This is the basis for our spirituality. I think this is even true for people who don't think they believe in God. Spirituality and our ideas about the spiritual or unseen world around us is a critical piece to our trauma work. In addition to our relationship with God and our beliefs in Him, there's a lot of spiritual oppression and warfare that seems to be connected with trauma. In my years and experiences and working with trauma, I continue to be surprised by how often and how intensely different traumas happen to the same people. There's rarely a single episode of trauma in my clients' lives. It's far more common for trauma survivors to have multiple traumatic experiences. Lots of times, there are even many types of trauma that don't seem connected. Some combination of childhood abuse or neglect, major accidents, physical or sexual assault, financial loss, broken relationships, they all seem to happen at some point in time in the lives of many trauma survivors. This happens too much just to be coincidence. There have got to be other factors in play. The Bible seems clear that we don't battle just flesh and blood. There are dark and oppressive powers constantly at work against us. Pretending this does not exist seems naive and leaves us unprepared. Our beat and our relationship experiences, especially and including God, are all viewed through a lens of our memories. In fact, in many situations, it's hard to tell if it's the current circumstances or our past histories that are having the greatest influence. We have 2 primary categories of memory. These are explicit and implicit. Explicit memory is what most of us think of when we consider remembering. It's the memory that we're fully aware of. We're conscious of it when we store it, and then when we bring it back up again. This type of memory is mostly made up of facts and information we've learned throughout our life or through our autobiographical experiences. Implicit memory is a little trickier. When we begin exploring memory in more depth, we'll get a better understanding of how our implicit memory can change everything. Implicit memory is memory we're not aware of as it surfaces. It's formed through events that happen when we're babies, in the processes and procedures that we carry out on a day-to-day basis, and when we're emotionally overwhelmed. Even though we may not be consciously aware of these types of memories in the moment, their impact is powerful. One hopeful and helpful fact that we will explore is that our memories can literally and physically change in our brains. This is true for both explicit and implicit memory. Hopefully, this brief overview will give you some ideas on things in your life to begin paying closer attention to. Noticing and considering these ideas gives us more information about ourselves and why we react to the situations and circumstances in the way we do. This information can help slow us down and helps us to think about how each element is impacting us and maybe how we want to respond in a healthier and more positive way. As a brief review of the full system, our full system's always at work in every situation we're in. Learning to pay closer attention to the system gives us more information about who we are, as well as why and how we react to the situations in the ways we do. Download the private eye and put it in places that will help remind you to pay closer attention to your full system. Any change in one part of our full system naturally leads to changes in other parts of our system. Learning about each part gives us a chance to think about why and how we react to situations, and a chance to see if small changes in these parts lead us to feeling healthier and acting better in a full system kind of way. Let's dig a little bit deeper into looking more closely at how the important aspects of each of these individual elements in our full system responses work. As we look at each area, we'll also start looking at tools and strategies that might increase your awareness and help you to remain more balanced and regulated.